Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be children of your Father in heaven. Good morning. Welcome to a short biblical reflection on the Gospel according to Matthew, chapter 5, verses 38 up to 48. It is about loving enemies. Gospel reading for the seventh Sunday in Ordinary Time, Year A. Last Sunday, we had the first part of the teaching of Jesus concerning his relation to the law and the prophets, that he did not come to abolish them but to fulfill. And the beginning, the introductory part, ended with this exhortation, "For I tell you, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven." And then consequently, as I mentioned last time, Jesus gives 6 examples from the law, the written and the oral, either one. Last time we had just 4 cases. Today, this time, we have just the last 2, the one concerning an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, the so-called law of vengeance, which is ascribed to Hammurabi, very ancient law, which put limits on vengeance. And the last case, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. The first part of the statement, you shall love your neighbor, we find in the Old Testament. However, we do not find explicitly the second part, hate your enemy. It had to be in the oral tradition, in the way of interpretation done by the Jews at the time of Jesus, at biblical times. And in particular, this last explanation of Jesus, that love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven, answers to this exhortation that the standard of righteousness of the disciples should exceed that of the scribes and Pharisees. And Jesus adds yet more explanation in the form of questions. For if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? Do not even the tax collectors do the same? And if you greet only your brothers and sisters, what more are you doing than others? Do not even the Gentiles do the same? Be perfect, therefore, are you as your heavenly Father is perfect. We could now quote just the so-called golden rule, which we find in the chapter 7 of the Gospel according to Matthew, verse 12. So toward the end of the speech of Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount, because now we are still at the beginning in the 5th chapter. In everything, do others as you would them do to you, for this is the law and the prophets. For sure, the Pharisees and the scribes could also answer that they obey this law because they love those who love them, they love those whom they consider as neighbors, those who treat them well, why they hate others who hate them. Reciprocity, the law of reciprocity. They do to those who do good to them, and they do bad to those who do bad to them. So nothing special. But the concluding statement, be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect. Firstly, we could refer to the Old Testament, for example, to the book of Leviticus, chapter 9, verse 2, when God tells Moses to announce to people, say to all the congregation of the people of Israel, you shall be holy, for I am the Lord, your God, I am holy. So holiness and being perfect is practically in the Old Testament synonymous, or even the same word translated here as holy could be also translated in the sense as perfect. But we could also compare our text and refer our text, the teaching about loving the enemies, with the Gospel according to Luke chapter 6, we have similar teaching, even more expanded than here, where instead of saying be perfect, Jesus concludes with these words, be merciful as your Father is merciful. Therefore, being perfect or holy, in other words, mean also be merciful, because in fact, in this teaching, even in the gospel of today, that loving enemies and praying for those who persecute is, in other words, forgiveness. The forgiveness that Jesus then will teach in the same Sermon on the Mount in chapter 6, when will give us the example of prayer, the so-called Lord's Prayer, when tells us that we should forgive those who forgive us before we ask God for forgiveness. I would like to wish you a nice day, a nice nice reflection on this gospel reading. God bless you.